Good evening and welcome to the special meeting of the Livonia Public Schools Board of Education for September 17th, 2018. And Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bradford?
Here.
Mrs. Burton?
Here.
Mr. Centers?
Here.
Mrs. Frank?
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Here.
Mrs. Bonnefield is here. President Johnson?
Here. We have a quorum. Welcome to all of those who are in attendance tonight. We're glad to have you here. Anyone who wants to follow this relatively short agenda can go outside to the right of the door and there will be an agenda. Anyone watching from home, you can go to our website, livoniapublicschools.org, highlight over the board tab, and you can follow along with our agenda. We only have one item on the agenda tonight, and we'll get to that in just a second. We'll start with our audience communication. I do not see any blue slips. Does anyone in the audience want to address the board tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to the reason we are here tonight. Item 3, appointment of elementary principal. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson,
Mrs. Burton.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and appoint Robert Witherspoon as an elementary principal at Cleveland Elementary School beginning September 24th, 2018.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Burton, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mrs. Oquist, you're going to help us with this?
We are. I'm going to have Mr. Archibald, our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, get us started, and then I will be happy to add some additional information about our recommendation.
Good evening. Exciting to join the agenda tonight for this topic. I want to thank Cindy Scott, who led the interview process, and the other central office and building administrators who participated in the screening and selection throughout the process. We had an excellent pool of candidates from which to choose to fill this position. The recommendation tonight is to appoint Rob Witherspoon. Rob has a Bachelor of Science from Eastern Michigan University. He has a Master of Art in Educational Leadership from Wayne State University. Rob started his career in education outside of LPS, but then saw better of it and joined our district about 18 years ago, holding the position of elementary classroom teacher and assistant principal at Johnson Elementary for the last 6 years. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Oquist for some other comments.
Thank you. We, as you know, as part of our process, one of the most important things that we do in this district is hire the folks who are going to be working with our students or working in one of our schools or our departments in the district. We are who we are in Livonia Public Schools because of the people that we select to fill those roles. And we are so grateful for the feedback from the Cleveland staff and community with regard to filling that important role, that leadership role. We certainly thank Mrs. Regan for her leadership at Cleveland Elementary, and we are excited for the opportunities that she has in front of her, and we certainly wish her well. We had the opportunity to create a leadership profile, which is part of this important process. We do that with input from many different folks, but that starts with the staff at the school where we are looking to fill that leadership role, and then we add to that from folks across the district who work with that particular school community. We had the good fortune of having literally dozens and dozens of applicants for this position. We had a strong pool from which to interview and had some exceptional finalists. But we are very pleased to share with you that Mr. Rob Witherspoon truly fits that leadership profile for Cleveland Elementary. That feedback is very important. Each school community has some unique elements, unique needs and things that they are looking for at that point in time and that we believe will best suit that school community. Rob has been with us for almost 20 years as an elementary teacher, as a literacy leader, as an assistant principal and part of our administrative leadership team for many, many years. He contributes daily with building strong relationships with students. He is a fierce advocate for his staff and welcomes families into the school regularly. So we are absolutely thrilled to be recommending him for this position. We are thrilled that he is able to come on board in this capacity, and we believe that Cleveland is in outstanding hands. So we make that recommendation to you with great excitement and enthusiasm this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. Comments or questions from the board? Mrs. Britton?
Just wanted to thank our administrative team for reaching out to the staff. I believe that almost every board member, if not every single one of us, has been in many buildings over this past few weeks at open house curriculum nights and so forth. But we have heard many comments of appreciation from the Cleveland staff that they were asked for their input. And it appears that it's obviously been taken very seriously. But I wanted to pass that thanks on from the board perspective, that we really do reach far and wide when we're trying to get input on who we're looking for. But I just wanted to let you know that the staff did express a lot of appreciation, not just to you, but to also, we got that message loud and clear.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Burton, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Would you take the roll?
Mrs. Burton.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford.
Yes.
Mr. Centers.
Yes.
Mrs. Frank.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson.
Yes, motion carries. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, President Johnson, Board, Ms. Oquist, Mr. Archibald, Ms. Scott. I could go on and on with the names of to thank. Effective leaders that I have found in my past surround themselves with good people. I have been fortunate, as soon as I came into Livonia, to be surrounded by great people, from the teaching staff to now the administrative team that I've been surrounded with. So professionally, I am surrounded by great people. Personally, awesome. All facets of my life are surrounded with great people. So I thank you for this opportunity. I am truly humbled and honored to take over at Cleveland and become part of that community. I come from a fantastic community, and I'm going into another one. So I'm truly looking forward to this opportunity. Thank you. Oh, sure. Yes, I can. Here's my wonderful wife, Ashley, who is also an educator in the district at Riley. We have Thomas and Addison.
Hi, guys.
Yeah.
Glad to have you
They're
here.
slightly camera shy, but that's all right. But we have some of the staff members, and Rick Steele's back there. He's who I came in with at Johnson, so I was very surprised to see him. So thank you, and Ms. Regan, thank you for your support. So wonderful staff. I can't tell you enough how supported I am and excited I am.
Thank
you, Ron.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else to be brought before the board on the special meeting?
Quick
Mrs.
comment,
Burke.
along lines of what Mrs. Oquist had shared. I'd like to thank Bridget Regan for her many, many years of service to Livonia Public Schools. And while we are really sad to see you go, very sincerely sad to see you go, it at least gives my heart some condolences that you're going on to Wayne Risa and will be servicing the literacy needs of the students throughout the entire county. So we've had some folks who stayed with Livonia for their entire careers, others who have moved on to other positions, but it gives me great comfort knowing that folks who have spent so many years in the Livonia Public Schools are looking out for the needs of not only our district from a higher level, but other school districts in Wayne County. So thank you for your years of service.
Is there anything else at this time? Seeing none, then we are adjourned at this meeting. We will be back shortly to start our committee of the whole meeting. Good evening, and we are back now for our Committee of the Whole meeting for September 17th, 2018. For those of you who are watching at home, the Committee of the Whole meeting, if you're looking for more in-depth discussion than you see at our regular voting meetings, this is the one you want to watch. For those of you, again, who are at home and want to follow along with our agenda, you can go to our website, livoniapublicschools.org, highlight over the Board tab, and you can drop down and follow our agendas. We have it's not a real long agenda tonight, and we'll get through it. Our first item is audience communication. I do not have any blue slips, and I don't see anyone approaching the podium here, so we're going to move on to item 2, which is Committee of the Whole. And we have one item under Committee of the Whole, and this is our selection of voting delegates for the 2018 MASB Delegate Assembly. Do you want to lead us off with that, Mrs.
I will.
Orquist?
Thank you, President Johnson. As you all know, the MASB annual conference is going to be held very soon, and I believe just about all of our folks, are attending, which is fantastic. The MASB 2018 Delegate Assembly will take place on November 1st at 7:30 p.m. Delegates are selected by boards of education across the state. They are the ones that will decide MASB's position on a wide variety of issues. So it is an important opportunity for the voice of our community to be heard through representatives from our Board of Education. Only delegates and alternates who are named by our board may offer motions and vote on issues. We would like to, this evening, select 4 delegates and 4 alternates. Mrs. Wozniak will then turn the names in to MASB, and you will be added, to the roster for the November 1st meeting. At our study session, this item was discussed, and the following members of our Board of Education had volunteered and been selected. I just want to confirm that that is the case. We have President Johnson, Vice President Burton, Secretary Bonifield, and Trustee Bradford for our 4 voting delegates. Are you all able to serve in that capacity and willing to do so?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. We then have Trustee Centers, Trustee Frank, and Trustee Jarvis as 3 alternate delegates from the Livonia Board of Education. Are you still willing to serve in that role, and will you be available to do so?
Yes.
Since that is the case, Mrs. Wozniak will turn those names in to MASB. Those are required to be submitted by October 5th. We will be certainly well in advance of that, and you will be able to participate in that important meeting and offer motions and vote on issues before the MASB Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Orquist. Any other questions or comments from the board? All right. Then we'll move on to item 3, our Finance Committee. Mrs. Bonifield.
Thank you, President Johnson. We have just a couple items that we need to go over. The first of which is the item 3A, tuition rate for the 18-19 school year, and Mrs. Smith is going to assist us with that.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Good evening. This is an item that comes to the board every year. State law allows us to admit non-residents to the district if we so choose, and it also outlines the steps to determine a tuition rate to be charged for admittance of non-resident students. So the tuition rate is based on our operating cost from the preceding year divided by our total student count, and that comes up with the average cost per student. For this year, the proposed tuition rate for 18-19 is $9,914, up from the prior year's $9,812.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Mrs. Burton?
Yes, we understand, but for the benefit of the public, could you explain more of how that tuition is paid?
Sure. As a non-resident, we would include those students into our pupil membership count with the state, and we would receive the foundation allowance for that student. And then what we do is subtract the foundation allowance that we receive from the state from this tuition rate, and then the difference would be made up by the students or student's family. And as the board also will most likely recall, we typically don't enroll non-resident students, but we have made exceptions in the past. A prime example would be, for instance, a senior level student that's family has moved out of the area and they would like to continue and finish out their educational career here at Livonia Public Schools. We would consider making an exception and granting them membership into our district.
And one other question along that very line. I believe this board recently, within the last few years, amended our policy to include students who were currently in their junior year in that same situation if their family moves. Are you remembering the same thing?
Yes,
Okay.
it does sound
So they have to
correct.
be in their junior year or going into their senior year for that to take
Correct.
place. Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Other questions?
Then with your approval, we'd like to add this to the agenda for the regular meeting.
Are you guys okay with consent, or do you want to,
I'm fine with
good with
consent.
consent agenda? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, our next item is item B, emergency replacement bus purchase, and Mrs. Smith is going to continue along with Mr. Francis.
I have it covered, so if he does, if he's tied up, I can definitely address this for the board.
All right.
We're bringing forward a recommendation to purchase a 2017 minibus. And typically, we don't bring single bus purchases to the board, but we've had an incident. One of our minibuses was involved in an accident, and the insurance company decided that it would be best to total the bus and give us $39,500 for the bus. We've talked with our transportation department and asked if we could include this in our normal chain of events for October, but they've said this really puts a hardship. We have a very efficient fleet as it is, and we have a few other minibuses that are out of commission right now being worked on. So they've asked that we bring this forward for the board's consideration. This would be typically something that we would purchase through the Michigan School Bus Purchasing Cooperative, but our board policy does allow that in emergency situations we can bypass the bidding process, and we have confirmed with our transportation they do qualify this or consider this an emergency. These mini buses are used by our special education students, and they have certain features such as air conditioning that's very important. So that's why we would like to bring this forward for your approval. The bus is $51,000, and the reason we're going this route is it's currently on the Holland bus lot and would be available to us as soon as we get your approval to move forward. $39,500 is going to be covered by our insurance company, and so the rest would be made up by our general fund.
Questions? Mrs. Burton?
Is there any, obviously our next voting meeting is next week. Will that bus be held for us until next week or not?
We have asked, and they have agreed to hold it for next week.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I believe,
sorry.
Mrs. Burton, that is part of the special meeting that will follow the committee of the whole meeting.
Never mind, I'm sorry.
So that item will be on the voting meeting later this evening.
Okay, it's been a crazy day.
So
Sorry about
total coming out of our general fund is $11,500, just for the benefit of our audience. So the total minus the reimbursement from the insurance company.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? President Johnson?
Thank you, Mrs. Benefield. I have two. You've already answered one on the general fund. The 2016 micro minibus, was that part, I may have missed it, that was part of the bond?
It was, yep.
And do you remember what the cost was when we bought it?
Yes, I actually have that. If I'm recalling, it was $49,000, like just over $49,000, like $49,100. And I checked to see, we've had it for a couple years, so less the depreciation. We actually are getting a good price from our insurance carrier. I think our current book value for that bus was around 32 or 33. So they have given us some additional funds, I think recognizing that it's going to cost the district some additional money purchasing a new bus to replace it.
You must have a crystal ball over there, because that was going to be my next question. And how did they arrive at that number? Was it a negotiated number? But it sounds like we're getting a pretty good deal on the loss.
We are,
Okay.
yep. They looked at the total cost to repair the bus was going to be at 33,000. And so they recognized that it didn't make sense to put more money into the repair than what the actual current book value of the bus was. So that's why they're giving us this amount.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Mrs. Frank?
Just to clarify, we talk about this bus being an accident, but there were no students hurt on this bus, or there was no serious
Yeah.
issues with
All
this
of
bus
the,
on the bus?
there was just a few students on the bus. It was going to one of the programs outside of the district, but it happened actually right in front of the building, so staff was able to come out immediately and check on the students and no injuries. And then our staff did go to the clinic to be checked out as well. They did a drug and alcohol test too on the driver, and they came back clear.
Thank you.
Which is part of our normal protocol
Yes.
whenever a bus is in an accident.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? So we're going to vote on this in just a short while, so we can move on to 3C with Mr. Francis, the all-exciting bulk salt purchase.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Do all of you have the updated memo? There's a little mix-up in the memo that got sent, and I think you received the updated one with the final line for 1718, purchase of 2100 versus use of 1700, yes?
Instead of question.
Instead of see, question mark is my secretary's way of telling me I need to finish something.
Okay.
And I did, just sent the wrong one.
Good
So-
job. Way to go.
We do have the bulk salt annual purchase. As many of you are familiar, each year around this time, we bring in this for the board's approval. We have a shed out back that we have some salt in. We currently have, if you look at the memo I had sent you, we have about 400 tons still in there, which is a good number in case for some reason there's a really early, sorry, really early one. But at this time, what we're proposing is through the traditional My Deal extended purchasing program to purchase for the 17-18 school year 1,700 tons of salt. If you look at the memo towards the bottom, you can see the tracking we give the last few years, and we've had a little harsher each winter as we come through. Use of salt has increased. So last year, we bought our original amount, which was 1,700, and we bought some more during the year and still have about 400 tons of that left. And so this year, we're recommending a purchase of 1,700 again. And with the My Deal purchase, just to refresh some of your memories, it's part of the state contract for different MDOT groups. So you can purchase for this year 80% of what your number would be, and then you can go over a 30%. So we're aiming. Mr. Lau has sort of pinpointed 1,700 based upon last winter. It's always hard to tell from year to year. Fortunately, the salt will keep for a while. Something I want to point out, though, and I think it's important, is that the cost of salt per ton just about doubled from what we paid last year. If you recall, we had quite a winter last year. It's a supply and demand type of business, but with that contract, that was the best, obviously the winning contract price. But because it was such an increase from year over year, Mr. Lau had, just out of prudence and for sheer investigatory purposes, contacted a local company and checked on a quote for what it would be from them. And if you noticed from the memos, the local company had quoted out like $100 a ton for salt for this coming season. So it's an incredible price difference from what we saw a couple of years ago and last year. However, the My Deal Consortium contract amount is clearly a good number, yeah. So I let Allison know right away that the amount that that she probably had budgeted, if she had used last year's number, would need to double. So she's already on top of that and making her adjustments for the current school year.
questions? Can I ask a math question?
Yeah. Hold on, let me get my calculator's over my desk.
Do you have your phone on you?
No.
So for 15, 16, we had 100 tons left over. Yes?
Mhm.
And then if we brought that forward, that would be 1,600 tons into 16, 17, which would leave us with a net of 400.
Mhm.
Then we had another 400 left. Should we not have 800 tons of salt left over if we're carrying?
So the
Yeah.
word purchase may not be, maybe what we hold, would be a better way to
Okay.
phrase, would be a better way to phrase it.
Yeah, because it makes me think that there should be 800. If
Right,
I'm-
floating around magically somewhere,
in
you're
my
right.
little
Yeah,
head,
yeah,
I'm-
if you carry it over.
I'm doing carry forwards,
Mhm.
so, okay,
Mhm.
so.
I think they have used in, on hand and used, so to speak. We're trying to just keep a running number of,
Okay.
of what we've got.
Okay, that's good. Does anybody else have any questions? And you guys want to put this on voting or on?
This can be for next week, voting.
No,
for-
I mean, on the
Consent.
Oh,
consent,
consent.
or do you want to,
Consent is fine with me.
guys, consent, we're good? Okay,
Consensus vote.
all right. Okay, so let me jot this down. And then we have one more finance item, which is pizza bids.
Oh, yum.
Tastier item.
And Mr. Francis still has this on his agenda.
I do. This is for the Food and Nutrition Services Department, which is why I'm bringing it forward. And I wanted to bring you the information on the bid. If you recall, the last time this was out to bid a couple years ago, the district had ended up changing companies, and we ended up having Pizza Hut as the low responsible bidder. So we put the bid out again for the next 3 years. It's really 2 years with an option to go with a 3. And we had, if you noticed from the bid tab, 2 respondents, both Pizza Hut as well as Domino's have lunch programs with their pizza. But Pizza Hut, while the price is increasing from their previous contract a couple years ago, it is still the lower of the 2 bids. We've been satisfied with Pizza Hut the past couple of years that they've been providing pizza. And frankly, in a couple of tough times that we had, if you recall, one time we had the water boil. I think we actually had a couple of water boils over the past couple of years. And even though a singular Pizza Hut couldn't handle it, we branched out to others, and we were able to get responsive, orders in, et cetera. So we've been satisfied with Pizza Hut, how the program's run. I haven't done a direct survey to the students, but I'm going to guess they're liking the pizza. So we do have a 50-cent per pizza increase from previously. The contract that we're proposing and recommending to the board, as I mentioned, is a 2-year contract with an option for a 3, depending on what the market would be like in a couple of years.
And just to clarify, although their Pizza Hut had an increase, the other bid for Domino's was 75 cents higher
Yeah,
overall.
over the 2, Pizza Hut is still the lowest, but their price from what the previous contract was is a 50-cent increase. However, they're still 75 cents less than the other. Correct, thank you.
Mrs. Bradford?
With the increase in the per pizza, will that be carried on to the students? Will you be increasing the price of the pizza this year per slice for students, or no? Will that remain the same?
No, we would not be doing that. Our lunch program totals have been set for this year
Okay.
and published, and so at this point in time, we would not modify that. It's something that we'll continue to take a look at in the winter and spring.
Okay.
As part of our normal process, to take a look at what is the market rate in other districts for similar lunches,
Okay.
how many students purchase lunch, et cetera. So we monitor all of that. Generally, this is still a profitable
Okay.
venture as
Excellent.
part of our Food and Nutrition Services Department.
Good, I like to hear that, thank you.
Yes.
Questions? President Johnson?
Phil, in terms of the types of pizza, is it just cheese or cheese and pepperoni?
Generally, it's cheese and pepperoni. I mean, everything is cheese.
Yeah.
And pepperoni.
Okay.
I don't know if I said it correctly. Cheese and pepperoni. It's cheese, plain.
And cheese and pepperoni.
Mrs. Burton?
And unless anything has changed in the last few years, which I don't believe it has, this is not necessarily the same pizza you're going to get when you walk in and order a pizza, because it has a higher nutritional content.
It's part of their school lunch
Right.
program, correct?
Whole wheat
Approved by the
crust.
government.
Right, exactly. So that's, it is going to cost a little bit more than other pizza you can
Aha,
walk in the door
I
and
shouldn't
get.
say that.
But anyway, the higher nutritional standard is still in whole, in.
It is still part of their, it's still part of their school lunch federally approved, or, government approved program.
Okay, thank you.
Hence the two bidders that both run one of those programs.
Right, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, questions? Okay, Mr. Francis, I'm assuming this is going to go on the regular agenda?
Probably. People are
I
pretty-
was going to ask for, again, it doesn't have to be on the special night, next
No,
week.
no, next week, yeah.
Up to the board if you want to do it on consent or
Put it
not.
on regular.
Regular, okay.
Regular is fine.
Got it. Okay, thank
We
you.
want to talk about pizza.
Yeah, they're
Now
all
we're-
excited,
now
they're all
we're all-
excited to hear about
Well,
it.
only if they bring pizza for us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
Thank you.
And that will conclude finance, I believe.
Thank you, Mrs. Bonnefield. That'll take us to item 4, building and site, and that is our chair, Mr. Centers.
All right, we only have one item this evening. It's bid results for the Churchill and Stevenson dugouts. Mr. Francis is going to stay and update us on that.
Yes, and I'm inviting Mr. Scott Smith from Plant Marin Cressa, owner's representative. He's got some packets. I think that you got an updated memo from me along with probably the packet that you're seeing, but we wanted to make sure that you had one, so Scott brought it tonight. The update that was in the original packet last week was basically me saying, we're opening and reviewing it, and we'll get you more info. And then the updated one just had some of the information, background on the results of what we're discussing tonight. Thanks. So, just a real brief background in bringing us all around on the same page. We had bid out the softball dugout build at Churchill on the original athletic field renovation bids. And at that time, the team was not satisfied with the results that we had with regard to the cost, the bidders, et cetera. So we said, we don't have to. Those fields aren't used in the fall. We can do this and add some scope to it. So that's what we did. We added scope to the bid, changed it, and did a little work with regard to the Stevenson and Churchill baseball dugouts as well. So we added dugouts, and they're not going to be a build, but they are going to be a refurbishing of them, meaning a new roof, paint, benches, cubbies, bat holders, et cetera. It's basically giving them structurally what they need, as well as the items on the inside of the dugout, updating those items that the students or the players use. So we expanded the scope on it, put it out to bid again, and the effort on that was, let's do it after all these carpentry and different companies are done with their summer work, which they're so very busy doing. And as we brought to you before, we even extended that timeline to get it beyond Labor Day, et cetera. And we did receive 3 bids. We were pleased with the fact that those 3 bids, while higher than what we went in expecting them to be, were relatively tight bids. And the company that was had the lowest number is also a company that, after doing our post bids, and we did that with 2 of the 3, the 2 lowest, the team is very pleased with. It's a company that has done, frankly, quite a bit of work in schools, period, but even more to the point, they've done some local dugouts. They've done Walled Lake Western's dugouts. They did Clarenceville's dugouts. So this is some of the type of work that they are used to doing. Foresight is the designing company that we've been using with the athletic fields, and Foresight's worked with Axiom quite a bit in several different projects. So we felt very comfortable and confident with regard to the bidder, and we became much more comfortable with the number once we had the opportunity to speak to the bidder and get breakouts, and then even discuss some value engineering of items that may have popped on the line item and say, how can we bring those down? And he was very open to those conversations, saying, you know, we can try to figure out if we swap out one manufacturer for another, those types of things. So with that, you know, I've talked for a while. I know that you had your packets. I appreciate it. So with that, I'll let you add anything you want, and then we can take questions from the board. Do you want to add anything?
Questions, anyone?
I don't have a whole lot to add. They were the low responsive bidder. We did drill down with them quite a bit to understand where the costs were, you know, and they were responsive. They have all the information covered that's required. We did go into this with a 10% contingency, understanding that winter's coming. We could get a cold snap. We could get into winter conditions with the masonry and concrete, things that could affect it. It's a smaller category, therefore, you know, on a percentage basis, the contingency should be a little bit higher.
One of the things that we also discussed as a team, and I want to point out, is that, you know, when it's a one-off like this, and even though we did add some scope, and there is going to be work done at 2 different sites, you know, they've got to round up their crews and bring them out, even though it's a better time because it's not the middle of summer. It's relatively speaking a smaller job than if it was one massive job that they already had the masons on site and the concrete folks on site. And over at Churchill specifically, they're doing both the baseball and the softball, doing work on both. And those, as you know, the fields are already completed. So they're going to have to do a little more restoration. They're going to have to be a little more careful around those sites. So there's some reasons for a couple of line items also to be a little bit higher. And I guess preemptively, in case anybody's wondering about Franklin and why I didn't mention Franklin's baseball dugouts, in conversations with their athletic director and coach, they asked not to have anything done. They do a very nice job of keeping up locally with their dugouts. The coach gives it quite a bit of attention, and more recently, it's been addressed. And the benches that they have and the work that they've done on it, they just flat out said, we're set. Please don't, we actually like what we have. We don't want to have anything changed.
And they've identified some other priority
Oh,
areas
absolutely.
that are a little different than others.
Absolutely,
So-
absolutely. And that's going to be common when we get into the Franklin-Stevenson projects. Both of them have unique needs that are different than what Churchill had. This just happens to be one, but I wanted to just put that on the table and say, we're not ignoring Franklin. In discussions, they asked us that they're okay there, and we'll look at some other things.
Yes, Mrs. Rock.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. Just to clarify, the softball dugouts are going to be a
Correct.
whole new rebuild.
Correct.
However, the dugouts at Churchill and Stevenson will just be improvements.
So
not
softball
a
at Churchill,
tear down.
right, softball at Churchill is, so we're doing the softball at Churchill as a build, as you mentioned.
Yes.
And then baseball at Stevenson and Churchill are refurbished.
Refurbished,
Yes.
okay. I just
And
wanted
that
to
would include,
clarify.
again, roof, paint, interior items, benches.
Okay. And then when would this process be all completed?
So
By-
that's going to be this fall that we would be hoping, if the board does approve the project, we would kick it off this fall. And we have a timeline that we put in for end of October, I do believe, but
We went ahead and extended it to end of November, just
Sure,
to-
but it
just
will
to be
be
safe.
ready for next spring, the next spring season?
It would be ready for the next spring season. Even
Okay.
if, let's just say for the sake of argument, it did get to be colder than manufacturer recommendation to paint outside,
You
we would
might
just
have to
wait
do
until
that
the
in
spring. Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
So a couple things, Mr. Francis, would you share with the board and the audience why it's a new build at Churchill for softball? And then also where there may be some cost savings with regard to the,
Yep,
with regard to
absolutely.
the internal portions of the dugout
Absolutely.
as
So
well.
first, let's talk softball dugouts at Churchill. The softball dugouts at Churchill are very dated and they're in poor repair. Softball dugouts at both Franklin and at Stevenson, and more recently, they are brand new.
Okay.
If you see them, they are really
In good
quite
shape.
nice. I'd go beyond just in good shape, and
Yeah,
I'd
they're
say
really nice.
they're quite nice.
Okay.
They're much more recently built, and some of those things were done through boosters or fundraising. And this goes to Mrs. Oquist's point before. A specific need to Churchill was their softball dugouts, because they are not the same caliber as the Stevenson and Franklin softball dugouts. So we want to bring them up to look more like the ones that are at Stevenson and Franklin. Now, the flip of that, as we've had conversations with Stevenson and Franklin, they all, as we mentioned, have their own one-offs as well. Every school doesn't look exactly the same, and every school has a few of their own unique needs.
Sure.
Those will be addressed next summer when we do the other buildings. But the build at Churchill is to bring it up equity-wise with the other two softball programs.
Okay.
With regard to items that we believe can be cost savings, I'll give you two examples. One smaller, one larger. For example, fencing. We know that the fence line item from this bid was $4,400. We can do it for $1,000 or $1,200 based on the unit pricing that we have the company that's under contract already at Churchill doing fencing.
Around the track.
And so at that point, the little bit of fence work that would be done around the dugouts, the softball dugout at Churchill, the company that's already there can do it with a unit price, and the contractor that has bid on this said, if you guys want to do a fence that way, that whatever. So that could save us a few $1,000s. A larger scale one would be the specs on the helmet cubbies and the bat holders, those in the hooks that are going to go into all 6 of these bleachers. Dugouts, thank you. That would go into all of the dugouts. All 3 bidders bid the spec, but they're an expensive item. And in review, it may not be necessary to have such an item. We have many options and many materials which we can use to get coat hooks, bat racks, and helmet cubbies. So that's something that we will look at as we move along and very, very likely switch out to either a different manufacturer or a different product, et cetera, and we could save there, frankly, thousands of dollars. I'm going to venture to say that all of us, that was the first line we sort of saw and said,
We could do that.
So we can do better.
Yeah.
And we will do better. So the number we're bringing to you as 270 plus the contingency, we really believe that 270, that we can save $20,000 off the top from a few of the items we talked about. So we'd like to see this get closer to 250 than 270, but we always have to worry about field conditions and other things that pop up during a job. But we definitely are on board with working to see where we can save a few things. Any other questions?
Mrs. Frankie.
Just in the interest of saving money, which we all are for here, but we're not talking about reducing our quality. We would still make sure that the quality is still there for
Right.
the teams, that we're getting the best possible equipment just at a fair price. We're not talking about going to like a subpar brand or anything like that. We're still going to do something nice that's going to last
Correct. We would do a very common item that is found in high school dugouts. I'd venture to say what we spec'd is a couple steps up probably than what you would normally find in a high school dugout. It
Okay.
was, and actually rethinking all of it, I'm not sure aluminum is the best item, actually, even though it's weather resistant. I'm not sure I just struck out for the second time today resistant, if you know what I mean, so.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Burton.
Yes, the alternative bid that Axiom gave, metal roof in lieu of asphalt shingles. Not easy to say today. The $28,000, is that an adder if we go with the metal roof instead, or is this a deduction?
No, it's an add, then with the deduct on the asphalt roof. But we had decided that we were not going to recommend it. We were just trying to find dollars in places, and frankly, I spoke to at least one AD who wasn't. From a maintenance standpoint, a metal roof costs more up front, but it's much longer lasting. But at the same time, shingle roofs will last many years, especially if we maintain it properly. So as a team, we felt that we would try to save the dollars. If the board would like us to reconsider an alternate, we always can have that conversation.
So we can disregard that $28,000?
Correct. It's not 270
Okay.
plus 28.9. It's just showing the alternate that we had actually written into the bid.
Okay.
So all 3 had bid on.
Just for consideration, we decided not to do it?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Bonneville.
Mr. Francis, just for probably the public, is you mentioned the team a couple of times. And if you could just make the clarification.
Not the softball
that
team, nor the baseball team.
The softball team was not running the road show
Right,
here, that the
right.
team is actually.
The team is LPS, folks in my departments, Plant Moran Cressa, Foresight, who is our representative and designer in this. We're the ones that, put the bids together and then interviewed the bidders and then discuss what do we think we should do from here. And Mrs. Oquist is obviously the captain of the team because we come on down and let her know what's going on, and she sends us in with a play and we see if we can get it executed.
That analogy.
I got more. I got all night.
It was just the first time you
Yep.
said it just took me a split second to be like, oh, that's not the softball team
Yeah.
that
No.
he's
Our bond
talking about.
No.
We know
Our bond
that.
team.
Right.
No.
So I just wanted to make sure that we don't wind up with any comments that the softball team's running the show.
No.
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Francis, looking at the original bids that you said were significantly higher than budgeted, that in the spring of 2018, how did the bids that came in now compare to those bids?
Yeah, I can take this. So when we first bid it, part of the issue was we didn't have a very good showing, and the bids were, ranged incredibly. One was maybe 160, and the other one was 320-ish. So both numbers fell out of whack. There was no way to normalize the results. Both seemed higher than we thought at the time. We went back, we revisited the design of the new dugouts for softball and trimmed that down some. Plus, then we got strategic and tried to package it with other needs within the district for similar things to try to make the scope more attractive to people and entice them to bid. So the original number, I think, for the low guy was around 160, Mr. Johnson, and
that was just for the dugout build for softball at Churchill. That was no other work. Okay.
Yeah, so it's hard to compare
Yeah.
that to this because the
Yeah.
scope is
Yeah,
different.
it's a different scope. It was, a different time. And as Mr. Smith mentioned, when you get two bids, you need to triangulate it. If we had a third and two were high and one was low, or one was, two is low, we were just looking at it going, we don't get why one's more than double the other. We're not sure where we're going with this, so we pumped the brakes and said, we don't have to have it done over the summer. It's not a fall sport. Let's address it, and then, like mentioned, package it, see if we can make it more appealing through both timeline and a little bit broader scope. So it is a little bit of apples to oranges because we've got more going on in this pack than we did the first one.
Okay.
Okay.
And we appreciate you taking that second look at it. That helps us a lot. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Could ask for next week, voting meeting, please?
Great.
That'll work.
All right. Mr. Johnson, that concludes building and site. Thank you.
Thank you.
gentlemen.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. That will take us to item 5, Curriculum Committee, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Johnson. Tonight, the Curriculum Committee has 2 items to look at, and Mrs. O'Brien will address each of them for us. The first is the summer program updates.
Good evening. How are you?
Hello.
Good evening.
Hello.
If I can wake up the computer. Mr. Francis, will you turn on the TV for me? Since the remote is missing.
Here to help.
No cartoons this time.
Thank you. Oh, yep.
Anything else?
Yep, nope, that's good. So while that's warming up, I just wanted to share with you this evening some of the overview of our wonderful elementary instructional summer programs to support our students. We have 3 different programs, and I'm going to show the pictures of the cute kids after I'm done talking. So we have 3 different programs that we offer our elementary students to prevent or reduce summer learning loss. We have 2 Title I summer camps, Camp Emerson and Camp Frost. They're for students at our 8 Title I schools, Cleveland, Hayes, Randolph, Rosedale, Grant, Kennedy, Cooper, and Johnson. Each school invites students anywhere from kindergarten through 6th grade. And since Title I funds are used, only those students who are identified are eligible to attend. Camp Emerson is in its 11th year and Camp Frost in its 10th. This year they ran from July 9th through August 2nd, Monday through Thursday each week. Students were provided transportation to and from camp, breakfast, and lunch each day. At both schools, they received 90 minutes of reading and writing instruction, 45 minutes of math, and at Camp Emerson, they had 2 weeks of art and 2 weeks of physical education, and at Camp Frost, they had technology and physical education. Attendance at times has been difficult at our summer programs, so this year we tried something new. We held a parent meeting. Once we put out our letters inviting parents to sign up for our camps, we held a parent meeting. And it was very short, but one of the most important purposes of it was to share with them the importance of attendance, that it's 16 days, 4 weeks, 4 days a week, and both camp leaders, Mr. Colling and Mrs. Rawlings, both felt that parent meeting made a difference. They still had some kids who were absent, but not to the extent that we had previous years. And they also shared the importance of that this is a good stepping stone to connect, leaving a grade level in June and starting again. It's not necessarily going to make huge gains, but actually help students keep what they learned the previous year. So this year, Camp Emerson had 114 students participate. 18 students dropped before we even got started, and that does happen. And we added 2 additional students that first week. Camp Frost had 98 students registered, and 88 of those students attended, so 10 dropped before camp started. But they were very proud. They did a lot about attendance because they struggled a little bit more than Camp Emerson did, and half of those students, 48, had perfect attendance and only missed 1 day. So they did a lot to really build with those parents. Each year, our Title I administrators and our camp leaders really work to find the balance between some academics and some fun, so students want to come. At the end of camp, all the parents, the student, and the staff are all surveyed how camp went this year. This year, of the 98 parents at Camp Emerson, only 20 responded to the survey, and the results were good. 70% felt camp helped maintain or improve their child's interest in reading and writing, and 90 felt that the program had a positive impact for their child overall. At Camp Frost, 26 of the 88 parents returned the survey. Of those parents, 66% felt the camp helped their student maintain or improve their reading and writing, and 83% of the parents felt the program had a positive impact on their students overall. So I'm going to pause for a minute before I tell you about the third program. So every year we ask them to send us pictures of our students at camp, starting their day here, having breakfast. This is Camp Emerson. When they come in the morning, and the morning I happened to stop by, it was quite warm, and they were all having breakfast, just having a grand old time, and they had opened the kitchen door to bring in the morning breeze, and it made such a big difference. We have our students doing math, reading. This is all still Camp Emerson. So different programs utilize Title I licenses that we had. So our buildings buy Title I licenses, and they expire over the summer. So we use those before they expire so that our students have the same opportunities they did during the year. Doing some kinesthetics. And then this is Camp Frost. Starting off the day together, having breakfast. Some of our flexible furniture in that classroom as they're working on their reading and their writing. Again, in the computer lab. Mr. Spruill in the computer lab. And doing PE. So The other really nice thing about the program is each week they send home newsletters and communicate with parents what students at each grade level learned. And our academic results, our goal is for them to maintain. And we had students who at Camp Emerson in the first grade class maintained the same number of letters and letter sounds, except for one student who actually went down, but maintained. So knowing their letters, so that's kindergarten going into first grade, so knowing their letters and letter sounds. Then they also tested them on high-frequency words, and then did a little bit of the guided reading. A lot of the students who attended Camp Emerson started at a level A and ended at a level B. So, mostly maintained. At Camp Frost, their focus was really on that reading-writing connection, and they did a lot of the integration, so they didn't spend as much time, and they don't take students as young as Camp Emerson did, so they usually start them at second grade, not that first grade. So they spent a lot of time reading and writing and did a lot of nonfiction, and in their summary of their report, they're hoping to create a whole unit for next year on integrated reading and writing around animals. And so that's that staff. There's some new people on that staff, and they're going to write a new unit for them to use. So our third program is Students Helping Students, and we partner with Madonna University. It is a summer literacy program for students who have just left kindergarten or first grade. And we had 15 first graders receive instruction this year. And again, the focus is on letters, letter sounds, rhyme, sight words, and then overall reading. Most students who participate are students who are in need of making some of those gains. Mostly in the kindergarten group, they made gains with their letter sounds and their sight words, and again, maintained their reading level. 2 students made growth from A to C in this kindergarten group. And then we had 9 second graders. That was a little bit lower than other years, and so Mrs. Finkel is going to reach out to the elementary principals this year and find out what maybe in June came up that we didn't get as many second graders sign up. And all of those students made growth with their high frequency words. 5 of the students maintained their reading level, and 4 students made 2 levels growth. So again, at the conclusion of that program, parents are asked to complete a survey about the program. 16 of the 24 parents completed the survey. All of them rated the program as excellent and exceeded their expectations. And all parents responded that they saw their child's attitude towards reading and writing improve. So again, these are our 3 summer elementary programs that we have each year that students can participate in to maintain their academic growth over the summer and continue that success that they've built. Any questions?
Mrs. Burton?
Thank you. We've heard about these programs for several years, and they're terrific. And my thought is always, can we get any more students into the programs?
So we invite identified students, and then we have enough room for more, so Camp Frost is a great example. Many schools invite more, but it's whether lots of our parents turn us down.
Right.
At Hayes, when I would invite parents, many of them, those 4 straight weeks, and I would ask them, and so we would say, if you can't give all 4 weeks, we'd rather give the spot to someone else.
Right.
So that's always just the hard thing to do, starting at the Monday after the 4th of July week and then running the whole month of July.
Okay.
I think our building principals, do their best to invite. If they're a Title I school-wide, you can invite any student who's at those schools because the whole school is identified as Title I. If you're at a targeted school, you can only invite targeted students identified by their need.
Okay. So we're inviting all that we can invite with whatever the stipulations are with the given programs.
We do.
We're just trying. It recognizably it's a difficult time, and with a half day like that too, you may have parent work schedules they've got to maneuver around. So.
Yep. Yep, it's a balance.
Yeah. It's always just so exciting to hear the results of this program and just want to get as many kids into it as we
Yep,
possibly can.
I agree, 100%.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
No, thank you to our dedicated staff who are there throughout those summer weeks and certainly providing not only that important instruction, but that continued structure throughout the summer for those 4 weeks, providing breakfast and lunch, providing an opportunity for students to stay engaged in the learning process. It's not a full day, but it really does keep them immersed in that learning process, which is so important. So thank you to you and your department and team for putting that together.
Our next item is the previously approved social, oh, I beg your
Are we
pardon,
going
Mrs.
to,
Bonnefield.
is this just for the committee of the whole
Yeah,
meeting?
just for information, yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Our next item is the previously approved social studies textbook.
So I am bringing to you the request to replace the previously approved world history book with the correct world history book. So a little background is that publishers make what they call a survey textbook. So it's sometimes, especially in high school, and they're trying to sell to multiple states, right? So they create a book that covers a lot, a larger book. And that's what they send out for schools to pilot. But they also inform you when they're working with you that they also have that same information trimmed down. And so it was during the textbook adoption process that our teachers and Mrs. Finkel found that they did not need the full amount of time for world history in the survey book. That they did sell a pared down version that covered ancient through early modern times. And this was actually the book she brought to Committee of the Whole when we requested approval to purchase. When the final quote came through, so the book that was on the quote just said World History, Great Civilizations. This title is World History, Great Civilizations, Ancient through Modern Times. So we did not look thoroughly at the quote that had the additional amount of specificity to say it was the condensed version. So on the professional development day, the person from the publisher was presenting and put our teachers online with the online portion of the book. That's what the purpose of professional development was. And she started in eras earlier than this book. And the teachers were like, oh, we wanted the shortened version. And so that's how it came to our attention. So this book is the same book, just shortened, and the cost is less both for the textbook itself and for the online purchase. So I am requesting that we replace the approved textbook with this textbook. This textbook's cost is it's $91.50. So the book previously was $103.50. The online version of the text is $81.50. The previous cost was $93.50. So the total cost is $91,091, which the previous longer book, the incorrect book, was $109,083.
Mrs. Bradford?
Thank you. So when they were piloting the book, they actually piloted the shortened version of the book. It's just, is that correct?
No.
No, so when they piloted the book, they were piloting the longer version of the book? Okay.
But when they pilot, so when a textbook company makes it so for multiple states, through the process, we're looking at what our state standards are. And our state standards didn't need the eras at the earlier age and the later age. We needed less. So during the pilot, they were doing their own curriculum, so they wouldn't have used those, but they were looking at that book, and that's when the publisher said, well, we make this book with less eras in it, less timeline, shorter timeline.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Centers?
So just so that people at home are clear, this is not in addition to the other text. This is, we were going to purchase that other text, and this will be a alternative.
Correct.
Great.
We did not order the textbook hardback, and the online version, they've just switched us over to the correct one.
Right.
So the book you saw the evening that it was presented to you is the book.
This is the
that was
correct
selected
book.
and is the book that we are purchasing. However, the quote, therefore the motion that was read was the one that was piloted. Even though the amount is lower that we would be expending out of the textbook fund, we felt that it was most prudent to have a motion on record and an approval on record that accurately matched the title of the book that we are purchasing. So the book that you saw, the book that was described to you, and the book that was reviewed with the Board of Education and reviewed with the principals and utilized, that portion of the book that was utilized is all the same.
Correct.
However, the quote that came was the book that was initially piloted, which included the additional eras.
Okay.
Those portions were not piloted, just the eras covered that matched our curriculum. However, in consultation with President Johnson and our review, again, the motions that are read, which included a slightly different title and a different total cost, would not be reflective of the purchase that we want to make. Therefore, although it delayed it just a bit, they do have access to the online version, and we felt it was most prudent to have on file the correct name and dollar amount. So we'll be asking you this evening at your special meeting to review that information and to approve this title brought before you.
President Johnson.
Okay, now I want to make sure that we're clear. What's the title on that? And this is the book that we want to buy. And what's the title on that?
World History, Great Civilizations, Ancient, I can't read it.
Through
Through Early Modern Times.
Okay.
So the
That's what's on the motion.
subtitle is not what was on the original quote. The original quote just said, World History, Great Civilizations.
Okay. I'm looking at, and that's why I want to be clear, because I'm looking at Christine's memo of the 10th. And at the top, in the first paragraph, she says they want to replace it with World History, Great Civilizations, Ancient through Early Modern Times. Right? But at the bottom, it says, I apologize for my error and would like the board to consider replacing the previously approved text with the correct text. World History, Great Civilizations, Ancient through Early Modern Age.
Oh,
Is that a typo?
that's a typo.
Okay.
Thank
Since
you.
we're correcting, I just wanted to make sure that there aren't two different books.
Nope.
One that says Early Modern Times and one that says Early Modern Ages.
That's in the,
Yep,
both
it's
of
throughout.
those paragraphs, both
Yep.
of the last paragraphs.
Right.
And the third. My
Yeah.
apologies.
Oh,
So it's times, not age.
It's
It
times
is,
on
you are
age.
correct.
Okay,
It is correct in the opening paragraph.
all right. Phew, feel a lot better now.
And in the motion that you'll share this evening.
Correct.
Okay, any other, Mrs. Frank?
One thing is, thank you for being so diligent in this. I think that it's really important that we get it right, and Mrs. Oquist too. The dollar amount was less, but I think it's great to have, to be to be accurate for the public and for everyone. And it is so exciting. When we were at open house, and the teacher said, we're getting a brand new book, and it's so exciting. It's a great textbook. So the teachers are so excited about this, and I think that that is fantastic for all of the parents. When she was saying it, all of the parents know that the district has approved, and the tax dollars are going to such great things for the district and for these kids to enhance their education. So thank you for doing that, and the teachers are thrilled to use it and excited about it. Not to belabor this point, but, so we did not get a whole shipment of the wrong book
did
that
not.
we're shipping back. This is a procedural, so the public knows, this is a procedural thing that we're doing, just so that record reflects accurately what we're doing.
Correct.
And it was caught before the order was put in.
shipped it.
No, before the order was put in.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mrs. O'Brien.
Thank you.
President Johnson, that concludes the report for the Curriculum Committee.
Thank you, Mrs. Jarvis. That takes us to item 6, Personnel Committee, and I'll turn it over to Mrs. Frank.
Thank you, sir. We have Mr. Archibald, who is going to share with us some updates on insurance and benefits, and that type of exciting things for our staff. In a few minutes.
Here he comes.
I should have done a longer introduction.
Good evening again.
Good evening, sir.
I just want to provide a little bit of an update regarding some changes or extensions to current carriers that we use for some of our insurance and benefits. Gallagher Bassett is a claim service provider that assists the district in marketing our insurance and benefits in order to best utilize our financial resources to secure desired claim services for the district and for our employees. This would include medical insurance, dental, vision, life insurance, accidental death and dismemberment, voluntary coverages such as short-term disability or optional life insurance, and so forth. Mr. McDonald, Mrs. Whitaker, and I started meeting with Gallagher last spring and reviewing as each of these different benefits or insurances, the renewal dates come up at different times, and so, again, Gallagher helps us stay on top of that and market that. So I'm bringing three quick updates to you tonight, one involving flex spending, the other with our vision plan, and the other with our life, accidental death, short-term and long-term disability. Flex spending, as you probably know, is just an opportunity for employees, and we have about 100 who take advantage of it, who use pre-tax dollars up to the capped amount, and that gets loaded onto the nice little card we get, and they're able to use that for medical-related expenses. Our current vendor, we are switching to, this is a relatively low cost annually. Currently, we pay about $4,800. The vendor that we're looking to switch to, which is Infinisource, we'll go with that. Starting January 1 of 19, it's a slight cost savings of about $250 annually to the district, and they come highly recommended to us from Gallagher Bassett in terms of being able to handle our business, and we look forward to them being very customer service oriented. There should be no noticeable changes for our employees. Our vision provider is currently IMED. The renewal for IMED is due up in January of 2020. Get it? Okay. All right. I didn't even plan that one. You thought I would have. So that's just to give you an idea as well. That's more than a year away, and we are looking at the renewals and marketing and our business and so forth. So in addition to approaching IMED about extending our current rates, our business was marketed to 3 other carriers who provided favorable rates. They were very compatible plan designs. Although these other carriers, again, the designs were similar to what we have now, but there were some different vendors and different networks, so maybe what someone is covered now in-network might be out-of-network depending on switching providers, but it's all for naught because IMED has agreed to extend their current rates for an additional 2 years. So that's a very good thing, obviously. We maintain seamless or no changes for our employees in the service and what we're used to, no additional costs to the district or employees, and this now runs through January 1st of 2022. Okay? The last one is a little bit bigger ticket item. This is the life, accidental death, short-term and long-term insurance. Currently, the employer-paid coverage for our district is just over $556,000. The renewal is up this coming January 1st. Our initial quote was about just a little over $259,000 above the current, or about 46% increase for employee-paid coverage. It was about a 5% increase for employee-paid coverages. These increases are similar to what we experienced back in 2016, which caused us to switch carriers then. Our business was marketed by Gallagher Bassett, and we received quotes back from 11 different vendors. Gallagher Bassett then takes that information and they review and match the coverage that is quoted against our collective bargaining agreements to make sure that things are consistent and there aren't any changes there. Based on that match, because there needed to be some tweaks to make sure that it all matched, they reached back out to the 3 most competitive vendors and asked them to send in a renewed quote based on that additional information. The most competitive proposal we received was from Cigna, which represents about an 11% increase over the current. Mr. McDonald, Mrs. Whitaker, myself, and the folks from Gallagher Bassett met with the team, both physically and in person, as well as a couple folks via audio conference, and they gave us their presentation. Cigna is one of the top 5 carriers in the market for these types of insurances. We were extremely impressed with their professionalism. We're excited about their customer service. An example would be currently, whether it's Mrs. Whitaker in the insurance office needing to follow up on a claim, for example. She's calling a number and she is getting whoever it is on the other end of that line and is maybe hearing this now for the first time and pulling up the information. That might be an oversimplification of it, but with Cigna, they'll have a team assigned to us so that she'll know who she's going to be speaking with, so we'll be able to establish a relationship there and what should be an improved customer service both for the district as well as our employees. So we feel very good about the customer service end of it. We'll make the switch to Cigna this coming January 1st. Again, it's about a $63,000 increase for the employer-paid coverages. Again, that's compared to about $259,000 in our quotes from our current providers, and there'll be no increase for our employee-paid coverages. So, again, that's just a quick update, but where we're at on some of the changes coming up in those areas.
Fantastic. Thank you for looking into those and for being such a diligent steward of the district's money.
You're very welcome.
And no action at the next.
That's correct. President Johnson.
Steve, when you were looking at Cigna, we were going to get this huge rate increase from our present carrier. Did anyone go back and look at historically how Cigna may have increased their rates over a term of years at all?
It's a very good question. Not to my knowledge. I don't know whether we did or we didn't, or if that's part of what Gallagher Bassett
maybe they did on our behalf.
Would have done.
Okay.
Mr. McDonald is shaking his head vigorously.
That's one of the things that they do is look back at that as well.
They do that for us. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Keith would be happy to answer.
Fantastic. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that wraps up personnel. President Johnson.
Thank you, Mrs. Frank. That will take us to item 7, Policy Committee, and I will turn it over to our chair, Mrs. Burton.
Thank you. The first item on our policy committee this evening is, excuse me, is Board Policy JCDAA, student smoking. While we don't like student smoking, we still.
Yes, that's a bad thing.
Since the 1960s, and before, we've been trying to stay on top of this issue. So we went over some updates in our study session, but I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Willenborg to bring the group back up to speed.
Very good. Good evening, Ms. Burton. Thank you. We began our discussion regarding smoking policy, policy JCDAA, Juliet, Charlie, Delta, Alpha, Alpha, last week at our study session. Our policy under review appropriately is designed to discourage the use of smoking tobacco. Students can't have it in their possession, and certainly through school rule, through board policy, and through the legal system, they can't use it. They're underage. From an administrative perspective, however, we believe the policy needed to be revised to include more current terms and aspects such as chewing tobacco, use of e-cigarettes, use of vaping mechanisms, and including not just tobacco, but bunny ears, other inhalants as well. And last week, we also discussed some wording and grammatical areas. I chose to wipe that all out, so there wouldn't be a question whether S belongs here and apostrophe reads here. And, of course, the Board of Education, we're talking about Livonia Public School students, but I don't think we need to say Livonia Public School students. So I just left it at students. And I think it conveys the message. So with those updates in terms of chewing, vaping, e-cigarettes, I recommend that this revised policy regarding student smoking be added to the agenda of the regular Board of Education meeting next week for further consideration and review.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm used to it being everybody else's turn. Are there any questions or comments on this item for the board? President Johnson.
Thank you, Mrs. Byrne. Deanna started to dawn on me when we talked about chewing, but then I think it's covered under the full paragraph that says shall not smoke, chew, or otherwise use, because I was thinking the pouches that they have.
Sure.
That they're not chewing it, but it's still a tobacco product. So I guess that's covered under that paragraph.
Tobacco substitutes and the like. So
okay.
It's a challenge to keep up with the many forms of tobacco use, certainly.
It also says
last week,
tobacco in any form.
Sure.
That's also.
Because we talked about patches and
Sure.
certainly the pouches, and it's all out there, and hopefully we feel it's covered under tobacco in any form.
Are you all set, Mrs. Johnson?
I am good,
Okay.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this? Just to let the parents know, too, who may be listening to our meeting tonight, vaping seems to be one of the most current and still very dangerous form of use. And some of our students are under the misguided impression that it's not harmful. It most definitely is. If you want to talk to your student assistance providers, if you have questions on that, on what to look for in your home to see if your students are involved in that, but it is very dangerous and it is forbidden by our schools.
There should be a clear message sent through every secondary school, that vaping is wrong. Anytime if you're inhaling something that's, in the form of a cigarette or a vaping mechanism, it's doing damage, to your otherwise healthy body. There should be no question about that among students, and you don't know the extent of the dangers and the potency of some of the products that are out there now.
Which has increased exponentially over the past 3 years.
For sure.
And we do request parents' help in trying to stay on top of this, as it is currently, it is in vogue with students, but we need to, as a community, try to get on top of it.
Sure, and we appreciate the help of the St. Mary's and the
Save Our Youth
Youth Task Force
Absolutely.
in getting that message out. So.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Mrs. Bonnefield?
First reading?
Yes,
Yes,
please.
please.
This will be a first reading at our next, our meeting next week. The next item on our agenda is Board Policy JCDAE, Personal Communication Devices. And Mr. Willenborg.
Yes, thank you. We also began our discussion on the electronic communication devices, policy JCDAE, last week. And the policy previously known as, like I said, electronic communication devices was last reviewed and written in 2004. If I remember correctly, at that time, almost 15 years ago, cell phones didn't have cameras or apps that they do now. But even so, absolutely, their use in school to most was nothing short of the eighth deadly sin and a slippery slope to the biblical Armageddon. And it reads that way in the policy when it speaks to, that, students are not permitted to use or have, to have them turned on between 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. on any day of the week. I mean, it was, like I said, the sky is falling essentially if you had or were using a cell phone in school. The revision on this policy, and it has been completely rewritten, while it still prohibits accessing inappropriate websites and recording without permission, it recognizes personal communication devices as a valuable instructional and learning tool, whose authorization of use is best left to the teacher in the classroom and the administration. So that's probably the highlight of the policy now, or the biggest takeaway in the policy is that it's going to be a classroom decision, it's going to be a building decision, and there's slight nuances between buildings of when it's appropriate, whether it's appropriate at lunchtime or during passing time. And I think that variance is fine, as long as it's communicated and to all the students in each school and consistently enforced. So I recommend that this revised policy regarding personal communication devices be added to the agenda of the regular meeting of the Board of Education next week for further consideration and review.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the revised policy as it's given to us?
This was
Much needed.
dramatically different, so thank you for your hard work on this.
Times they are changing.
Times they are changing, absolutely.
I think this was one of several when Mrs. Bonifield and Mrs. Laura and I, who is no longer on our board, took a look at this, and there were several that needed wholesale changes, and looked at them and said, this needs a complete rewrite. So I appreciate you getting this one back to us on that. Mrs. Frank?
Can I just go back to the smoking one for just 1 second?
Sure.
I know we passed it, but I forgot that we're doing a first reading on this next weekend, or at the board meeting. Although we don't have the updated policy in place with all of the homecomings coming up this week, not all this next weekend, but over the next couple of weeks. Although we don't say vaping in the old policy, because we're still under the old policy, it still is included when it says, if we're still under the old policy for schools right now, discourage smoking in the other use of tobacco by students. So we are still covered with the vaping and that sort of thing.
Absolutely, let it be perfectly clear, even with the old policy, vaping is wrong, chewing is wrong, pouches are wrong, but we wanted to be a little more, wanted to be a little more explicit and clear in the policy and adding, particularly vaping.
Right, okay, perfect, thank you.
Very good point, thank you. Any other questions also on the personal communication devices? No? All righty, seeing none, we'll put this on the agenda for the 24th for first reading. Thank you so much, Mr. Millenborg.
Thank you, Ms. Burton.
That concludes policy, President Johnson.
Thank you, Mrs. Britton. That takes us to legislative. Mrs. Bradford.
I do not have anything to share tonight. Do we have anything, Mrs. O'Quist?
We do not, Mrs. Bradford.
Okay, thank you. We're up. That concludes our committee.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our agenda. We do have another special meeting, and before I conclude this meeting, I just want to say, for Eunice, this is for you.
Aww, that's...
And we're concluded, and we'll be back shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, and we are back, and this will be the special meeting of the Livonia Public Schools Board of Education for September 17th, 2018. Mrs. Bonifield, would you take the roll, please?
I would. Mrs. Bradford?
Here.
Mrs. Burton?
Here.
Mr. Centers?
Here.
Mrs. Frank?
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Here.
Mrs. Bonnefield is present. President Johnson?
Here, we have a quorum. We only have 2 items on the agenda for consideration tonight, but we need to start out with item 2, audience communications. I don't see anybody in this jam-packed conference room tonight approaching the table, and I do not have any blue slips, so we will move on to item 3, approval to amend the purchase of social studies textbooks. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mrs. Bradford.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District amend the motion for purchasing middle school social studies textbooks that was approved on August 20th, 2018, by removing the textbook World History, Great Civilizations, First Edition 2016, from Cengage Learning for 7th grade social studies, and adding the textbook World History, Great Civilizations, Ancient through Early Modern Times, First Edition 2016, from Cengage Learning at a total cost of $91,091.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mr. Centers. Mrs. O'Brien, you will help us with this.
Thank you, President Johnson. I am bringing an amendment, a request to amend the purchase of our social studies textbooks. This textbook was the one that we are requesting this evening as the book that our teachers and our textbook adoption committee approved and requested. The quote that was sent for August 20th had the title, World History, Great Civilizations, First Edition. The title itself is the same title, but it did not have the shortened amount of timeline that we are looking for that matches the state of Michigan social studies content standards. This book is shorter and less expensive than the larger version of the book that we have looked at and used as a pilot, but during the adoption process, the company shared with us that they do sell it in a shortened version, and that is the book we want. And that is the book we are requesting and shared with you, but on the quote, we purchased or went to request the purchase with the wrong textbook. So we are asking to amend that.
Questions or comments from the board? Mrs. Burton.
It's just a correction, or clarification. We didn't actually get through the purchasing process. It was during that process that we caught that the title was different than what had been presented.
Correct. On the professional development day, when she was providing professional development on the full number of eras in the world history book, that we realized that the quote was incorrect, and we had not purchased them or ordered them. And we had started the process, but it had not been finalized.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Bradford, supported by Mr. Centers, to approve the amend the purchase of the social studies textbooks. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. O'Brien. And now, that'll take us to item 4, approval to purchase emergency replacement bus. May I have a motion, please?
President Johnson.
Mr. Centers.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation to make an emergency purchase of one 2017 Bluebird Micro Mini school bus from Holland Motorhomes and Buses, Holland, Michigan, for a cost of $51,000. $39,500 of that amount will come from the district's insurance company. Therefore, the final cost to the district will be $11,500.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. And Mrs. Smith, you will help us with this?
Yes, thank you very much. As you recall from our committee meeting, we discussed that one of our minibuses that was purchased with the 2013 bond was involved in an accident, and the insurance company deemed that it would be better to call it a total loss and to give us $39,500 to go towards a new school bus. We are asking for your approval this evening and moving it along in our approval process because we've talked with our transportation department, and they are feeling the need to get this bus replaced and out on the road as soon as possible. It's a bus that's used for our special education students, and so there's certain features on it, such as the air conditioning, that's important that we have. And we have a few buses that are out of commission right now, so we're hoping to get this purchased as soon as we can.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none. We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Jarvis, for the approval to purchase emergency replacement bus. Mrs. Bonnefield, would you take the roll, please?
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford?
Yes.
Mrs. Burton?
Yes.
Mrs. Frank?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Johnson?
Yes, that motion carries. And that will take us to item D, adjournment. If there is no other business to be brought before the board at this special meeting, then we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.